Challenge is a lot of people are doing work that does not give them energy, that does not help them contribute to the world. And then in 20, 30, 40 years, then they're going to quote unquote rest and retire. If you are doing work right, you should never want to rest and retire. You should only want to change and adjust the work that you do. Our aim should be to create and to contribute and to build up and to connect for our entire lives. Pick and choose times to rest strategically in ways that actually build up more energy for the work that you're going to do and the way you're going to contribute to the world. I want to talk about rest in this episode. Where does rest fit in to a healthy entrepreneur's life? Where does rest fit in where it's productive versus destructive? And I'm going to be talking about a couple concepts of rest and some other things I pulled out of one of my favorite books of all time, guys. It's like less than a 100-page read. I read it 15 years ago, and it's one of the books that kind of really originally set my foundation for just how to think about life. And I know I'd never read a book at this time 15 years ago like this, and it opened up so much for me. And the weird thing is, when there's a book like that, you would think you should just read that all the time, right? Like anytime you get stuck in a bad spot or you're losing momentum or your attitude is starting to get a little sour, you think, man, I'm going to go back and read that book. Well, I'm starting to do that a lot more this year, and that's one of my missions this year with my books is rereading the classics, rereading the books that really helped me to get where I am today, because there's probably a lot of amazing nuggets in there that I can relearn today, but also a lot of amazing nuggets that just are more relevant for me today. Maybe I'll actually grasp these ones and I didn't grasp them 15 years ago when I was just getting started as an entrepreneur. And so the book is a Jim Rohn book, and it's called The 7 Pieces to Life's Puzzle, something like that. Those aren't the exact words, but 7 Pieces to the Life Puzzle, or 7 Pieces to Life's Puzzle. You're going to look at it. It looks like it's a home-produced book. It looks like it's was printed in Jim Rohn's garage. The cover is pretty hokey. It's a very short book. There's no pictures in it. And when you open it up, the thing is, look at the table of contents, and you'll grasp pretty quickly that it's a simple book on simple concepts, but these concepts can make a big difference. And the concept I'm going to talk about today out of the book is rest. And this is a concept I've talked about on the podcast before. Where does breaks, where do breaks take a role in our lives and our business? I've talked about sabbaticals before in the podcast. We'll link that episode up. I've talked about taking a month off several times in the podcast on how and why I feel it is important sometimes to take extended periods of time off after you started to get your business going. That can actually help you delegate better, can actually help you pull out of certain parts of your role better, to do more of what you love and what you're great at. And so we have talked about this topic of rest before, but I want to talk about it the way that Jim Rohn talks about it. Okay, so let me read this life truth out of the 7 Pieces to Life's Puzzle. I want you to see how this relates to you and how it relates to your goals. How does it relate to what you're aspiring to with your business? How does it relate to the way you're currently structuring your time? How does it relate to, the way that I think about things? We'll kind of process this together and figure out how we can have more healthful rest in our businesses and lives, and what happens when we take too much or make that the goal, and what happens when we take too little. All right, guys, so this one here, it's about rest. And so Jim Rohn says rest is a necessity. Okay, rest is a necessity, but it's not the objective. Okay, rest is a necessity, but it's not the objective. And I'll talk about that a good bit here in a second, about retirement, about why I'll probably never retire and I never want to retire, but my work will change. We'll kind of dive in what that looks like. So rest is not the objective, all right? If we rest too long, eventually the weeds will take over the garden. The Bible says work 6 days a week, rest the 7th. Others today feel that's not enough. So we're in a society right now, guys, where rest is something where people are turning that into the goal. Okay, and I think that's damaging. I think that's something that is not the intent of our lives. That's not why we're born. That's not how we actually contribute the most. That's not what's going to make us happy or fulfilled. I feel it's actually going to do the opposite of all of that. So let's kind of break down and look at how society is now, how it was maybe 50 years ago. And so, decades ago, the workaholic culture really, really took over in general. right? Everyone worked so much. It was just the thing that you do. You work all the time. You work a lot, especially as entrepreneurs. You just work a lot. Even 15, 20 years ago, the grind, is elevated. The grind is really celebrated. And the grind, when you're grinding, man, you're probably not resting a whole lot. Even if you are taking a vacation or even if you're going out and partying with your friends, oftentimes it's not a true rest. And we'll talk about what a true rest is for me here in a second. So the last 5 to 10 years, maybe, I think actually rest is glorified and even taken too far. Now, what does that mean? You talk with a lot of the millennial generation. I'm not going to paint that brush that it's all millennials, because it's not, but it's definitely a trait that the millennial generation has kind of taken and ran with. That, I want 4-day work weeks. I want this, I want that. I was reading something the other day that talked about millennials and how they actually want to work fewer hours, and that's something they demand in their jobs. I was talking with a doctor friend of mine when we were heading over to do our hiking trip, and the doctor friend of mine said that he's been interviewing people, doctors, well-educated people, and he said the older generations are where he is. He's about 50 years old. He's like, those doctors and above are working their butts off. Not that younger aren't, okay? We don't want to say and paint the broad stroke for everybody, but it is a more common trait now. He said, they're working their butts off almost too much where they're not getting enough rest. And now the newer doctors that are in their late 20s, early 30s, things like that, are wanting lots of time off. And one of them came in and said, work-life balance is really important for me, and I need to have all this time off, and I need to be able to do this and do that and do this and do that. My hobbies are important to me. And that's a good thing, right? But that's definitely a generational thing where that was not something that was common 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Okay, so rest has changed in our society, and I think some of it for the healthy and some of it for the worse. So let me reread this passage over rest, and I'll give you my opinion on it. Okay, so rest is a necessity, not the objective. If we rest too long, eventually the weeds will take over the garden. The Bible says, work 6 days, rest the 7th. Others today feel that's not enough. So I'm gonna break this down. The first thing is rest is a necessity, not an objective. When people ask me if I'm gonna ever retire, my answer very quickly is no. Okay. And it's not because I'm a workaholic. I don't work 40 hours a week most weeks. Now, right now I am, because I'm buckling down and I'm recruiting people and some other things. So I am working 40 hours a week now. But it's probably going to tone down back to 20 or 30 hours a week in the next 3 to 6 months as I've built up the right things to be able to pull me out of certain roles and elevate certain people to do amazing work. But when people ask me, like, why are you not going to retire? I'm like, why would I retire from something that stimulates me? Why would I retire when the things that I'm doing at work give me that fulfillment, give me that impact, and actually, when I'm creating, like I said before, that gives me momentum and energy. Why would I ever retire from that? And the challenge is a lot of people are doing work that does not give them energy, that does not help them contribute to the world, that does not fulfill them. A lot of people are doing work that is a means to an end. They're just making work to make money so they can pay their bills or pay for that car or pay for the boat or whatever it is. And then in 20, 30, 40 years, then they're going to quote unquote rest and retire. Now, if you are doing work right, you should never want to rest and retire. You should only want to change and adjust the work that you do. And over time, our aim, I've talked about this a lot of times, over time, our aim, I feel, should be not to rest and retire at the end. Our aim should be to create and to contribute and to build up and to connect for our entire lives, all the way up until the last day of our life, hopefully. But during that time, pick and choose times to rest strategically in ways that actually build up more energy for the work that you're going to do and the way you're going to contribute to the world. Now, how do I do that right now? And kind of what's working, what's not working? So in the past, I've done a full month off every July. July is my birthday. It's when we head down to the lake cabin, which is closer to where my wife and I grew up. And it was always a really, really amazing time. And 2016 is the first time I took a full month off without checking in. And for me, a month off is like a month off. You're not checking in. You delete every communication app from your phone that has a chance to communicate with your team. You give your team very clear guidelines on, hey, these are the things that I want you guys to own now while I'm gone. here's the things that if something slips into one of these kind of guardrails, there's an expense that pops up that's this amount or higher, or there's a personnel issue that requires a firing or a hiring or whatever it is, then call me or text me. Don't Slack me, don't Vox me, don't do any of this. You call or you text me because I'm going to have everything else turned off. That for me is rest. Now, what I discovered for me though was I kind of needed that extended period of time during that part of my life, because I've talked about this before, guys. Around 2015, 2016, I had a big moment in my life where I was not resting at all. Okay, I was working most every day. I was working at night. I was working during the days. The only time I wouldn't work is when I came home. I brought my computer in, but then I hung out with my family, hung out with my wife from probably 5:30 until 10 or 10:30. And then my kids and wife would go to bed, and I'd pick up my computer and work from 10:30 or 11 until 2, 3 in the morning, almost every day. And the business kind of needed that, though. It was a grind period. It was a grind phase. The business needed that to get off the ground, but it almost killed my family. One day, we were heading down towards the lake cabin a few hours away, and during the day, I fell asleep with my family in the car. It was 2, 3 in the afternoon, up in the mountains, curvy roads, guardrail. I fell asleep. Just in enough time, I woke up to be heading straight towards the guardrail. I swerved, hit the guardrail, stopped cold in the middle of the road. And my wife asked me, like, what happened? And I just said, I fell asleep. I need you to drive. And I didn't drive on a family trip for 6 more months. And I started drinking Red Bulls when I was driving. I've since stopped. I hadn't ever drank coffee or Red Bulls really before that. And I was kind of scared, like, am I going to fall asleep again? But what was happening was I wasn't resting. If I would take a weekend off, my mind was just always going on work. I would work 10, 12, 14 hours a day. And this happened for well over a year, maybe even 2 years, to really get the business off the ground. And so in 2016, I kind of needed like just a big rest, because we got the business to a point to where there were people in the company that could do the work. And I needed to be able to delegate more effectively. And the best way I thought at that time to do so was for me to force feed and force the function of me taking extended periods of time off. Not a week, not a few days, not 2 weeks. Anybody can take a week or 2 weeks off and not have the business fall apart. But if you take a month off, that really challenges all your systems. It actually changes the way you have to show up. It changes the way that's an entire cycle of projects, right? And it's very hard to just take a month off without having competent and capable people in place to run the daily of the business. So I planted that stake in the ground in January, said, hey guys, I'm taking a month off in July. So I gave the team 6 months. Then we went through a process I talk about in another episode where I talk about sabbaticals and I talk about how to take extended periods of time off. And I essentially list down all the things that I currently do that will drop when I'm going to be taking a month off. And I talk to my team and I say, hey guys, what are all the things that I'm currently doing that you come to me for, that you can foresee you're having to come to me for when I'm gone? And then it took me that several months to be able to build those systems and processes, delegate things to the team members. And then I just literally don't check in, and they don't check in with me unless it's an emergency and it meets one of those 2 or 3 criteria. So that for me is what I needed the entire month. No communication with work, because it helped me detach from the daily grind and it helped me attach to the vision again. Now, the next 2 years, I did it again. I took rest again, a big long rest. Now, did I also take weekends off most of the time? Yeah. Did I also take some vacations with the family? Yeah. But they weren't long enough to truly let my mind rest. It was always just long enough to take a little bit of a break, but not long enough to really get rejuvenated. And this is, like I said, 7 years ago. And so I started to do that. But what happened, I discovered, was I started to take I started to have a better pattern of rest in my life after 2016, because I saw the benefit value of it. So my family and I started taking more time off during the holidays. We started taking trips to Maui and other places where we'd be gone for 8 to 10 days. And that was really rejuvenating. We started to take other trips. I started to stop working weekends. So after that, almost accident, I just said to myself, I'm like, I'm going cold turkey. I'm not working nights or weekends anymore. So I left my computer in the car at nights. I didn't work on weekends. And I did this for probably 2, 3, 4 years, where I could count on one hand the number of weekends or nights that I worked each year during those years. One hand. So maybe 3, 4, 5 nights a year. That was it that I picked up my computer and worked, or weekends. And so I kind of went the other way there. I was almost like taking almost a little bit too much rest, during that 2 years, because I'd lost the ability to be able to really get fired up and focused on important things that I couldn't get done during the workday. So during that couple years, I was able to get my normal work done because I didn't have a big team at that time. But then as I grew and started to hire directors and stuff, but I still had this same pattern of rest, of no working on nights, no working on weekends, my work days started to get full of meetings, and then I wasn't able to get my important work done anymore. And so then I'm like, oh, shoot, I need to do something. I need to hire some of the right people, but also I need to change my pattern of rest. So I need to be able to, for this time period, start to grind a little bit again for this time period, for 6 months or for 8 months or for a year, to build the systems, hire the people, recruit the people, and then be able to step into the next phase of rest again. And so where I am right now, guys, is I found a pretty good cadence for rest. Now I'm still optimizing it, but for me, what's important is time with family. And I don't work after noon usually, 1 o'clock usually on Fridays. And so I pick the kids up from school on Fridays. We go and do things. We go hang out. We go do whatever we're going to do on Fridays. Okay. Another thing that I did to rest my mind was I stopped scheduling meetings before 12 o'clock. Now I still will have meetings before 12 o'clock, but only if they're on the most important, high strategic types of items. So I'm not having meetings on tactical work anymore before noon. I'm not doing any tactical work, or people can't request a time with me before noon. I've got to request a time, and it's got to be directly related to high priority, high impact items, high impact work that I'm doing. And so that's another way that's helped me rest, is changing my schedule to make sure that I can use my creativity and not be grinding, going from meeting to meeting like I had for a couple of years during that period. And now I don't take a full month off. I actually don't want to take the full month off right now. I like taking 2 weeks off. And so I'll take 2 full weeks off. And like I said, during that time when I was still taking a full month off and I stopped working nights and weekends, what happened was after 2 weeks, my brain started to lose its sharpness. So the 2 weeks was amazing, not checking with work, not checking with me. But then after that, my brain started to lose its sharpness. Okay, the weeds started to grow into the garden, just like Jim Rohn said. And I think you guys can probably relate to that. If people say, man, what do you want to do? What's your dream? Or what do you do when you retire? Man, I'm going to golf every day, or I'm going to, plant my stake in the sand and have people deliver margaritas to me every day on the beach. And that just sounds like paradise to me. Well, it's probably going to sound like paradise for a week or two. And then after that, if you're an entrepreneur and you're a creator, you're going to start to go, man, I feel listless. I feel like momentum is starting to fade. I feel like my energy is starting to fade. I need to be able to contribute to the world again. And if you need a vacation from your work, then you need to change your job, right? I've gotten to that spot in my life many times where I'm like, man, I just need this vacation. Well, it's every single time you need the vacation because you need to change your job. If you're an entrepreneur, you need to change your work. You need to hire some people. You need to delegate the right things. You need to do the energy at it and build the right things back into your life and back into your schedule, so you don't have to take a vacation from work. Make it so work gives you energy, doesn't take it away. And so if you're in that spot where you have to take a vacation from work, you're not doing it right. Right. And I'm saying this from experience, not from Trevor on the high mountaintop. Never done this before, but from Trevor on the mountain, on the same climb that you are on, that has done this many times in different phases of my life, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I let the weeds grow in again. I let myself bring way too much low energy or energy draining work back into my life. And then if I go back the other way and take too much rest and take a full month off, the weeds start to grow in the other way, where I start to get lazy. I start to not have sharpness in my brain. I start to lose my creativity. Okay. And so that's what it looks like for me, guys. I'll take a full 2-week vacation, no checking into work, every year. I take extended time during the holidays. I take, the back of Fridays off. I don't do meetings before noon except for on Mondays now. And that's working better for me. Now, is it perfect? No, but it's working better for me. And it gives me a good balance of rest. I usually don't work nights unless it might be one night a month or one every other month. Well, I'll kind of pull a 3 to 4 in the morning gig to really just get this important work done while no one's awake. And that works for me currently better than waking up at 4. I'll do that once or twice a month, and I'll jam on it and I'll get a lot done. And that works for now. Now, will that work next year or 3 years or 10 years or 20 years out? I don't know. I'd love to be able to get up at 4 and jam on a couple hours of work before everyone gets up. I haven't adopted that discipline yet. I know I'm capable of it, but I just haven't adopted that discipline yet. Okay. And so guys, I want to kind of finish with reading this again for you now. As you're thinking about vacation, as you're thinking about why am I doing this, I want you to really clue in on the part where it says rest is not the objective. Okay. In different parts of my life, I have thought, man, I'm going to someday sell a company and I'm just going to be able to hang out. And whenever I've done that in micro doses of 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, I can tell you that my life didn't get better. I think it got worse. Certain parts of my life got better as far as like, oh my gosh, so much good time with family. But eventually the family kicks me out the door because I'm like, I just need to go do something. So I end up going outside and doing yard work, or I'm like busy around the house fixing stuff. I'm reading books all the time. And even my wife was like, babe, I need you to go like do some work, because that's where you get your energy. And that's where you're honestly the best husband and father, is when you're creating. And just, even if I do that for an hour or two, then you're creating, and I can get that energy back versus just not working. Okay. So guys, rest is not the objective. Rest should be a tool. Rest is a way to get reinvigorated on vision. Rest is a way to reconnect with yourself, with God, with your family at a deeper level. Rest is a way to have perspective over the rest of your life so you don't have busy overtake. Rest is a way to keep your mind sharp in the right areas, and change the way that you're thinking about stuff. Rest is not the objective. I'll finish it with this. I was watching a Netflix documentary years ago, and they're following people who were centenarians. I think that's what they call them. Is people who were over 100 years old, and they interviewed people who were 110, 105, 103, all kinds of ages. And the crazy thing about this, guys, was number one, they talked about fulfillment. They talked about how you've had so much longevity, but they were all over the map. This person said, man, I'm living so long because I believe in God. This person said, I'm an atheist, and I'm living so long because I have purpose, and I wake up and I write, and I didn't start to become an author until I was 80. This person over here says, I'm living so long because of my diet, and I'm eating really, really healthy, and I have my whole life. And this person over here says, I've been smoking for 60 years. I smoke a pack a day. I don't drink water. I drink mostly alcohol and beer. This is a real person in England. But you know what? I run marathons, and I work still today, and I wake up and I do work, and I'm 102 years old. That guy particularly washed the cars of a plumbing company. He washed like their vans and their service vehicles, and that was his work. That was his purpose. And he did marathons, and he would literally have to take a smoke break in between miles, and he wouldn't drink water. He drank beer. And this is a guy from England. So the reason I'm telling you all this is there wasn't one common trait of any of these people who have lived long, fulfilling, healthy lives, except for they had purpose in work. Every single one of them had purpose in work. Now, did the work mean they got paid for it? Sometimes not. One gal was an author, and she started when she was in her 80s. Another gal volunteered at her old folks' home, but she had responsibility. She had work for and with the other residents. The other person washed vehicles. It wasn't like this game-changing work. It was just there was purpose and there was work. And you go on down the line, every single person had work, and every single person had something to wake up to that wasn't just rest. All right, guys. So I'm going to leave it with this. Go get that book, Seven Pieces to the Life's Puzzle by Jim Rohn. It's the simplest read in the world. I think every high school and college kid in the world should read it. I think every adult should read it. Probably read it annually. I'm going to start reading it annually again now. It meant as much to me this time as it did before. And I'll start to pull out some other concepts from about attitude and some other things that are really important and relevant for me right now, and probably relevant for you too. All right, guys, have an amazing rest of the week. Schedule the right type of rest into your life and into your schedule. Don't let the weeds grow in. Contribute, create value, guys. And we'll talk to you soon.